my screen. I will show you my presentation. So, okay. Let me just see. I'll put you here. Okay. I hope everyone can see the presentation. So, yes, you already know what I'm going to be talking about: cultural differences in international business. And I was very grateful that Anuj invited me here and asked to talk about this. And it's a topic that I'm so used to it that I never even think that that's something that other people don't experience in this way. But then I realized that people have so different experience with this, and I'm glad that I can share my perspective. And hopefully we will learn from this, getting some insights. Maybe it will help you to relate to some parts or avoid some mistakes in the future that I have made, and yes, so that you can use in your work, in your business in the future. So yes, this is mainly about my own background, what I've learned, and how I ended up where I am currently. So, and just to start, already Anush mentioned that I'm from Estonia. So Estonia is a country in Europe. It's a very small country. It has 1.3 million people. Now, I think your towns are literally bigger than our whole country. But that's the country I'm from. And so we are located in quite north of Europe. It is our northern neighbor is Finland. From the east, we have Russia, and then from the south, we have Latvia. So yes, northern part of Europe. That's just to paint you a picture approximately where we are based. And I'm going to just jump now further into. Oh, it stopped now. Okay, so my work experience was already shared, but I just going to give you some just basic numbers for you to see it in summary. So I have 7 years in people development and education. And out of these 7 years, I have worked 3 years managing online course creation projects for 3 USA bestselling book authors that you saw on LinkedIn as well. And out of these 7 years, I worked 3+ years as self-employed and contractor. So the reason I'm bringing this out is that I have experiences with different companies, public institutions. I worked in those companies, but also I worked with clients from the USA, Ireland, Switzerland, Estonia, Malaysia. So a little bit of experience from different continents, different backgrounds, that's what I want to bring into this presentation for you today. Now, sorry, somehow I don't know why it's jumping this way. Okay. Education. So again, you already are familiar with this to some extent, and this is just the education that is involving my current work that I do. I'm not going to focus on too much, apart from the fact that I gained the most important education from my current work from Ireland. Now, let's jump into how did it all start. And when I thought about this question, and for me, it all started actually from the day one, literally the day when I was born. And why this international experience started from the day one was because my mother is Lithuanian. This is not a direct neighbor of Estonia. There is one country in between. There's Latvia, and then there is Lithuania, more south from Estonia. So I was brought up in an environment where my mom spoke Lithuanian, my dad spoke Estonian, and I grew up in a town that had 85% people speaking not Estonian, mostly Russian. So for me, it was growing up basically, what it meant basically speaking 3 languages at the same time already from the early start. And that was normal to me. That was just how I felt that the world is around me, and that's how I grew up. Obviously, I understood that it's not the case for everyone, because it was very, very nice for me to talk to my mom in Lithuanian, and I knew that others didn't understand it. So I could just, I could share something that was important to me or I was shy about. So, so it was very nice for me, and I knew that others wouldn't understand it. So I really enjoyed that part. And what was interesting, that background for me actually helped me to already see things differently from early age, because I saw lots of struggles people had. I saw the division people had, the Estonians versus the Russians. We have in Estonia around 30% Russians from all the population. which is quite large amount. And there was lots of division between the people, not between everyone, but still there was some tension. And because I was in a town that had so many Russian-speaking people, and not even all of them spoke even Estonian in the shops or in the public services, then it made me more empathetic. So I started to understand how are they feeling, but also from my own angle. And I from early age, I became like a glue between different nations or the environment was, because I felt like I was like a translator. So I translated not the languages, but I translated what they meant or the intentions, or tried to understand. And also by seeing my mom being in a different country, it helped me a lot to try to see how she perceives the world. And so when I went to university in Estonia, in Tallinn, and I was surrounded suddenly by more Estonians than I had before, because in my own school back in the town where I was in the high school, we had Estonians, around 2/3 Estonians and then 1/3 Russian. So lots of people were speaking Russian during the breaks, and so it's just somehow that was how I grew up, and it was normal. And when I was in the university where there were more Estonians around me in my own class, I was like, wow, I'm actually not an Estonian, but I'm not the Lithuanian either. And so I was like, I don't know exactly like who. Then I'm like a mixture of things. And although I consider myself obviously Estonian, and that's my nationality, the core nationality, but I'm just influenced by other aspects, the cultural aspects that I was brought in. And so that made me realize from early age that I wanted to be surrounded by other cultures, and that's where my career opportunities went to. My career opportunities were, I chose my career opportunities based on companies or places where I could be more surrounded by international people, because that's where I felt actually home. And just a funny fact is that I was in Lithuania for summertime. So my parents took me to Lithuania, where my mother is from, and to spend their summers. And there was a time when I think I was 4 years old, and I was there for 3 or 4 months, and I just spoke only to my relatives. At that time, there were phones already, obviously, but no internet. I mean, we didn't have, internet connection, and so it was. I remember that I came home, and then I forgot Estonian. So there was time in my life when I forgot my own main language because I was speaking only Lithuanian, but I was 4 years old, so it's forgiven. And I quickly got it back. So that was something that I remember to this date, that how strange that felt for me that moment. But so that's my background. And I just like to now show you just a little bit more how to actually, what happened further for me. Just a second. So international work experience. Then if I put the numbers that I have, or basically I decided to do a little summary of the number of years I've lived in the foreign countries. So and also in my own country. So just to bring in the combination and show you the background where my experience is coming from, to give you that understanding. So I worked in total in Estonia, in the country of my origin, for around 10 plus years. And by working, I mean that's the time when I was actually actively working. So I started in my teenage years, and then worked during summers while I was studying, and mostly I did it in catering business. And already when I was working in either city center or in the capital city. So I was exposed to a lot of tourists. Also, there were Russian people around me. And that was my early work experience started from international work. I mean, on a smaller scale, obviously, it was in Estonia, in my own country. But then when I was in high school and 11th grade, then in Europe, there's a nice thing that we can travel quite freely around, especially in the European Union. And that time, England was part of the European Union. So we had an opportunity to work and live for 3 months in England as 18-year-old girls with my friends. And we went to catering business. And that was my first time in my life when I was actually exposed to a population such a wide range of people from different populations. And I remember this was a real cultural eye-opener for me, because I was used to, prior to that, to European people, and suddenly I saw everyone. I saw people from Asia, from Africa, from America, from Australia, and also working with them. So in the catering business, there was also customer service. And I suddenly saw that there are just so many differences. And just as a fun thing I wanted to share with you is the language, for example. So yes, I did study English at school, like lots of people do. But obviously there are little things that we don't pick up at school, or we don't study. And for example, in England, the way they speak is that and I'm sure you may have heard that too. A lot is like, can you do that for me, please, love? Can you put it there, my dear? And I remember when first time a manager or there's a lady who said like, can you do that for me, love, please, or put it there? I was like, why they say love? Like in Estonian, love means just something so, we share it when it's with something so deep, and it's not so often used, this word, maybe nowadays a bit more, but when we grew up, it wasn't so easily shared. And suddenly just people who didn't know me just told me love, and it was just part of communication. It was just like hey, you girl, basically. It meant the same. It didn't mean anything. Or when there was a group of girls, like 4 of us, and someone addressed us as, hey guys, can you bring that over? And I was like, but there are 4 girls, why do you say guys? And I remember I was puzzled, and I didn't realize that, okay, guys, it's a group that's meant guys. So these were the things that struck me at that time. And but what happened there was that when I got a glimpse to that by working there with different, and especially in customer service, I think customer service is an amazing place to work, to understand better the different people, how they interact, how they speak, what are the ways, and what to learn. So this was, as I said, very eye-opening experience. So after I finished my university back in Estonia, I decided to go to Ireland for a year to take time off, and it ended up being 6.5 years. That's where I studied. That's where we studied together with Anuj, and so yes, and also I worked there. And suddenly, while Ireland and England, they are close, and obviously Irish culture is affected by English culture a lot. It was different world, and the way people in Ireland, what was interesting, what I noticed, and I'm sure Anuj maybe can relate to in his own way with this, is how like people have this niceness. So for them, it's like being nice, being polite, saying these nice things. And in Estonia, my country of origin, or more in this, let's say, how they call this, Eastern European people, they're more straightforward. So we like to perhaps like what we feel, we just address it, and let's say it may not be considered so, it may not be perceived so well in every context. So I remember I had to learn to be less direct in certain moments, or when I said something, there is nice using these like pre sentences in a head, or may I say this, and then adding something, because that was considered more polite. So there was so much to learn and adjust my own language. It wasn't that I didn't know the language. I knew the language, but I just didn't know how to connect with people. And obviously with the time, and especially working also in customer service while I was studying, helped me to really see and interact more with the people, and to understand the local customs and what they valued. And I think this is the beauty of things, that not to only stick to those people we feel familiar with, but also to explore others, to understand, to be open to other cultures, because that's what's gonna evolve us and enrich us. And I think one thing is that we are afraid of, as human beings, generally, we are afraid of things that we don't understand. And often what happens with cultures as well is that we become afraid of what we don't know. Basically what this exposure to these different cultures helped me to understand is that I became less afraid of different cultures, because I saw that beneath that all we have still as humans the same needs, the same wishes we want to, but just maybe our angle differences, like let's say our flavor is different, and we have culturally different customs and things, but still beneath that all we are humans with this similar needs. And that was, I think, the beauty that I learned in all these international environments. And which was interesting, after in Ireland, I actually I reconnected with my husband, who is Estonian and from my own country. So he brought me back to home, let's say, and it was very interesting. After you return home after living abroad, you realize that you change. Like I felt like a tourist in my home country. It's a funny feeling, but it took me around 3 years to actually feel like I'm rooted back to my own country, which is funny, but also understandable in many ways, because the country has changed, I have changed, and how to combine those things. So while working in Estonia, I worked for an international company in Malaysia, Mind Valley, and they had amazing thing that they asked their employees to come there who were from Estonia or other from abroad. They asked to come there for training. So I was there for 2 months for training in Malaysia, and later I was there for different course filmings as well, so half month more. So in total, I've been there for 2.5 months, and also worked in 2 weeks in the USA. But from the international living experience, then I have, as I said, I spent, so this is not something that I worked, this is something where I just literally lived. So I lived as a child, many summers I lived in Lithuania. So I think combined all the summers and different times I visited it, I think it's been several years together. And I also lived 3 months in USA. We were traveling there with my husband. That wasn't working, that was just living there. We traveled around, and we also managed to visit different states. So it was very, very interesting to notice how it all differs, because within the more southern in the USA, the impact of religion is so much stronger. The more north you go, there's more this liberal understandings, and the religion is important, but not so important. So, and it's just such a vast country compared to my own country, as I already mentioned you, Estonia, which has 1.3 million people, and you are also from such a large country. So for you, the scope of country is completely different. But in the States, being in the States, it was completely different culture shock, because people are so assertive, they are expressive, they're more, how to say, maybe salesy, and they stand for the needs. So that was, but that's interesting, because I was more familiar to the state culture, to the USA culture, because while growing up, I watched lots of American television. So that was somehow ingrained in me. So that's how culture actually, how we integrate it into your systems. And what is interesting, what I meant by the religion, is that was a cultural shock to me, for example, that in Estonia, we are considered very least religious people in general, one of the least religious countries in Europe, if I can say even this way. On world scale, I would say also we're quite not so much religious. And although we are affected by Christian values based on the history and where we were, and I'm actually Christian as a Catholic to my mom's side, but in our culture we didn't really practice it, and this is, I realized in my life later that this is something different, that because so many countries have their own religion, and that's such an important part of culture. And what the experience I wanted to bring with the examples I wanted to bring from the States was that, for example, if my perception of culture, of religion, was that it's more this traditional, let's say classical, if I may say this way, then in the States we saw different like rock bands that were Christian, and this was like the ideas were brought in so contemporary ways. So while I share this is now my living experience, it's so important to understand it, because while you see it and understand it and know the differences, this is what all happens at work. At work, there are people, and people have these differences, and these differences are the things that make them unique. So by just understanding it, it's so important. And I'm very grateful that I had this glimpse, because later, after living in the 3 months in the States, I worked with USA clients, the best-selling clients, and having that experience helped me a lot, because I could see where they came from more, and just to relate or know how to adjust my language or to express things in a way that they would understand it better. So yes, so that was definitely an amazing experience. And I also spent 2 weeks in Iceland in summer school. So Iceland is in north of Europe. It's very north. So it's been an interesting exposure. So based on now this experience that I shared, mostly it's obviously related to Europe. And what I noticed, and I'm happily sharing information about Europe, because you're in Asia, so perhaps it will help you just give you a better glimpse into what's happening in this part of the world, and that's what I'm more familiar with. And in Europe is that what we can see the clear differences is that in the more north you go, so let's say all these northern European countries such as Sweden, Norway, Finland as well, their people are more reserved, and they are more introverted. They don't like to be so social. And more you go to south, so south of Europe, Italy, and then there you go Spain, and then Greece, and all that. So their people are so much more open and sharing and expressive. So now these features are really, you can see that in their work life so much. It's like how people want to communicate, and it's like Estonians also considered this quite Nordic people. And I remember, but I have this little flavor from this little bit more southern part from my mom, and I could feel already difference in me, because I was expressing more temperamental, and I felt a bit different from my surroundings. But that's how it all brings into work, is that the people are when you understand where they're coming from, or you just ask about the culture, you can see also that whether they want to be at work, if they don't share so much, it doesn't mean that they are not interested or they're rude. It means that that's how they're used to, or they don't like so much perhaps external influence or the noise. Or for example, also here we grew up with having lots of space between, like there are not so many people, so we have space. We are used to having land, being by ourselves. And then I remember when I was in Asia, for me it was like there's so many people, and all of a sudden everyone's beside me, and I felt strange, because it's like I'm used to having my space and suddenly there's none. So by understanding that where people are coming from, when you work with them, it helps also not to assume that they're, as I said earlier, either they're rude, or it just means maybe that's how they cope. And also what is interesting in Europe, what I can say is that I think that in Europe we have lots of regulations, and that's not in every country, but as a rule of thumb, compared to what I would know with the States and with Asia, is that we Europeans like to rest more. So it's also in the law to rest, and when you to take holidays more. So that's a legal right as well. And just one fact that, for example, in Estonia, when women stay home with their kids, they can be 1.5 years with state funding at home without having to go to work. So and they receive the funding from the state based on their earlier income, which is quite unusual compared to the rest of the world, because people have to go to work, women have to go to work quite soon, either after 3 months, as I know in Malaysia, or after half year giving birth. So these differences are actually affecting a lot work life and how people are feeling at work. And let's say this having holidays was what I was mentioning earlier, is that, let's say, these cultural differences also that, like, when I worked with people in the USA, there's lots of lots of constantly being on, doing, and that's not so normal to us. And it is more normal to Eastern European countries to try to get faster, but in the long term, it isn't so fast. So it's it's interesting that can happen in the international company as well, is that where some people are used to just having longer holidays than others are like, come on, what you doing? Are you being lazy? But again, it's just a cultural norm. It's not being lazy, but valuing the time and also trying to take more time to rest, to restore energy. So basically what I want to do with this is just to give my perception of the work experience that I've gained. And I don't have so much experience with Africa or Australia yet, but what I've seen, let's say with the USA, was definitely that working there, as I said earlier, is so much like let's get going, let's promote going this like very strong languages, strong, I mean like strong in terms of like being confident and expressive, versus when I was more in Asia, I realized it's so much more collective, less individualistic as in the USA, more collective, more doing together. There's more gentleness in certain ways. So yes, it's such a vast and different world. And my most international experiences, now to wrap up the work experience part, my most international exactly have been in the environments where I was exposed to lots of different nationalities. So for example, TalTech, that was the university where I studied during my my bachelor studies. And I think university is an amazing place, the way you are also in university currently, is that you're in the learning environment, so you absorb so much already what is there. And especially if you put yourself into the shoes of other person who's coming from another country, this will give you so many more insights. So my tip is always to try to just understand others and just to have open mind to see what they're doing, just because it enriches you so much and helps you to become, opens your worldview so much more. Then Mindvalley, that I mentioned, the company that I worked from, mostly from Estonia, but the headquarters was in the Malaysia. Then in that company, they had 59 countries represented, people, employees from 59 countries, even over that. And there were around 300 employees at that moment where I was in there. So that's, I don't think that there are many organizations in the world, and there are obviously UN, there are organizations like that, but not so many, where you can at one stage be exposed to so many different nationalities. And they were mostly located in the headquarters. Obviously, I didn't have the opportunity to interact with all of them at that time. But what Mindvalley did really well was they, at work, they had cultural days. So when there was one culture, I don't remember exact rules, but let's say there was like, if there are like 5 members of the culture represented in the company, they can have a cultural day. So they share information about the country. They will bring some food from the country, or will cook if it's possible based on the ingredients that they can find, and share the colors of the country. And also everyone dresses up that day this way, based on the national colors. So it was such an amazing experience to be in it. And I experienced, I think, 1 or 2 cultural days while being there. And having the opportunity to experience this Asian part was for me completely eye-opening, especially, as I said, I grew up in the European part, and also I was by media exposed to the Western part. But then suddenly now I was experiencing Asia while being in Asia with Mindvalley for 2.5 months. It was a very beautiful experience. And also later, after Mindvalley, I worked with Sergey Young. So he's a longevity investor, and my work involved being interacting and collaborating with people from North America, also different European countries as well, and working in all of these companies from different countries. It was exciting because I could speak the languages I speak. So I speak 4 languages: Estonian, Russian, English, and Lithuanian. And as I said, I was already 3 of them I picked up from the early start. So it was, yes, it's just it's interesting how many international opportunities there are and how it helps us to expand our mind. So basically, yes, I just couldn't leave out the global image from this Mind Valley, because yes, that helped me to, yeah, being exposed to just even so many religions that I never knew were there. So it's a very, very eye-opening opportunity. Now, what I have learned, and so just let's look at let's look at the things from like, I would like to just theorize what I've learned and share the tips with you, so you can take some things away, integrate it in a way that meets your worldview, how you understand it, and as I said earlier, perhaps avoid some mistakes that I made. So first of all, cultural differences do matter and influence our working style, communication, perception, and expectations. So I would definitely, there wouldn't be this presentation if we wouldn't say there are no cultural differences, because clearly there are. And they are so integrated into our work, and it really depends on the work environment. So what I mean by working style is that in the culture, there are certain norms, how people are using the language, how they're using language when they express what they're going to be doing. So at work, this language is a key in many ways. So do we say that we're going to, in some cultures, people are very straightforward. They say that's what they say, that's what they mean. In other cultures, it can be not so clear, because it's polite to say some things, but it doesn't mean that the actions will follow. And if it's not clear, it can be very hard. And especially if because we perceive the world through the lens that we were brought up, and then suddenly we don't even know to think that other people wouldn't do that way. So this can bring lots of challenges at workplace if it's not communicated clearly at the start. So perception as well is even sometimes, by being the most well-meaning and not wanting to say things badly to others, we can come out as really rude people, or just not maybe really rude, but a little bit rude. And I say that my own experience is that when I was back in England and later in Ireland, it was how I used my language. And when I just said, for example, what is this? And there's like, so it's just so direct to say, it's like, would you mind explaining what you mean by this? Like adding these words. And I remember I didn't, in our language, is like, it's considered external thing to say. It's like too many words, so you should avoid that. And I remember, but then I realized, like, if I don't say that, or if I don't add these softer expressions, even in written language, I may come across very rude. And I also, even recently, I've seen differences between, I wasn't myself in that situation, but I saw how someone expressed their question very clearly, but they didn't address they didn't make it more gentle, or would you mind, or some adding that, and that came out quite, and the other person perceived it quite rudely. So I think it's these things can obviously be you can overcome this, but still it's important to be mindful of the way we express the language and how we speak, because it's important. And even the small talk that's common in English-speaking countries, it has its role. It has its cultural role. And while it's maybe very foreign for my culture, having this little small talk, it's actually key in other culture. So understanding that and respecting that is important. So the second point that what I've learned is that it's important to familiarize oneself with clients or employees' cultural background to understand them better. So that's pretty straightforward. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because let's say if you are not in the other country or in your own country, but your client is international client, or you work for a company that's international, then the more you seek to understand, the more you're open or just even curious, the more the other person feels seen, understood, respected, or even just wanted to be understood. And I think that matters quite a lot as well. So so if you want to have good relationships in business, it's never forget that people are behind it. And that's why just this common interest, this kindness, is something that brings you closer to others who are from different backgrounds. Now, when traveling to other countries, so when you go there to live or travel for other reasons, I believe it's crucial to learn about the cultural and religious customs and rules to be respectful. And that's one thing, is to be respectful. Another thing is that if you want to be safe and secure in certain countries as well, based on the religious differences, so not avoiding any mistakes that are that country that are maybe illegal there, like holding hands if people are not married, or I mean, that can be, in our culture that wouldn't be the case, but that's the case in many other countries. So yes, so that's it doesn't matter, regardless of how you've been brought up yourself and how your own country has changed over the years, is also it's never, I would just say, never assuming that it's the same how we are living. So it's always having this open mind that how it's in different places. Do I understand it correctly? Do I know how are they living? Now, apologies. So, apologies, there's something wrong with my screen. I'm very sorry about this. Last time it didn't work this way. I'm not in the end of presentation, don't worry. But just for some reason, I really struggled today with
just take your time.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
We have another 10 minutes or so to go.
Perfect. Yes. Usually it doesn't happen, and I tested. I don't know why. It's just like maybe my laptop needs to restart. So just continuing what I've learned and now bringing things to your work. What I think just for you as business students is really, really crucial is minimize misunderstanding. So you never can avoid completely, but you can try to aim to minimize misunderstandings at work. And so to do that, it's important to communicate clearly and set expectations. So now, clear communication and expectations vary from country to country as well. But it's still, sometimes it's better to express a little bit more and assume they don't know, or even if they know, and then just hear that, oh yeah, they know that, and that's fine. But this way you can avoid so many misunderstandings. Even with, for example, with time. So in Estonia, for example, we say time 5:30 would be, so for example, in some countries, what I try to say is that 5:30 is, in some countries is 6:30, in some countries is 5:30. So it's really, really important to sometimes double check things when you assume time or language, even if you know that this is the way you're speaking or the people around you speak, then never assume that that's a common knowledge, unless you're 100% sure. Now, the more multicultural the company is, the more effort should go on helping employees to understand the company values and working style preferences. So what I learned a lot from working in one of the most multicultural companies that I worked in, Mindvalley, is that what they did really well was they focused on company's values. So they were expressing what these values mean and how they're happening in the work. So when you do that now in the international company, then that helps everyone, regardless of the cultural background and expectations they have about how they can express themselves, what is considered rude, what is not. The company gives them a clear guideline how to act and what actions are considered effective. So, and I think also in business world is this assertive communication, where when you are saying clearly what you mean, what you feel, without having other people guess, and also being polite, obviously, in this process. So that's definitely crucial if you're in the future work or currently working already in international companies, and if you're trying to help the culture to become more inclusive, then definitely having guidelines, clarity, explain. This may seem such a mundane thing to do sometimes, because it's like, why we're talking about so basic things. Consider that it's not mundane for everyone. People see things differently, and you want to ensure that the company is aligned in one direction and people are seeing the vision in one way. Now, that doesn't mean that the culture differences shouldn't be excluded. The culture difference brings the beauty and the diversity in the company, and that's definitely an advantage and brings lots of innovation as well. But to avoid the challenges, it's crucial to have clarity on where the company is going. And now this is working in the company, but if you have your own clients, then that's the same case. Do more preparation work at the start, be clear from the beginning. It will avoid you lots of costly mistakes and challenges. Now, the third point on the slide, it's helpful to avoid assuming and instead focus on finding a common ground for collaboration. I cannot stress more enough this phrase, is that this assumption is when we think that we know, we're clear that things are this way, it's dangerous. I'm not saying we should question everything, but always leave a little space that we may misunderstand things. Don't assume that things are the way you think they are. Have this understanding, but also have the space to change your perception when things are changing, and inquire more information. When you don't know, the safest thing is to ask questions and clarify till you have enough data that your assumption is true or false. And collaboration is the key, because I've had conflicts myself. I'm not a conflict-prone person in my nature, but I have had conflicts with people with different working styles because of how we saw timelines. For example, so Estonia has been affected by German culture, and German are like punctual, and this has to be done this way, and and I remember, and when people, maybe the timelines weren't so clear for them, or they didn't see the bigger picture that way, we had a conflict. So I think the best way for us was to overcome the conflict was by focusing on what is our common goal. So we eventually work in people we work with different people at work. So we cannot always choose who we work with, basically, but and it doesn't always matter what culture they're from. Even from the same culture, we may not have the same interest. But what matters is that we seek, if our work is combined, then we need to seek the understanding, do our best, and this will just help things work. And I think that is something that has helped me throughout my career a lot, is to seek collaboration for the betterment of the result that we are trying to achieve. Now, to wrap this part up of what I've learned is it overlaps what I shared, but I'm putting into words here. So it's important to focus on embracing differences while maintaining our own cultural heritage. Easy to say, not so easy to keep clearly. But what this sentence is saying is that we're living in this international world, and while the business is becoming even more international with COVID as well, with online world, we can now just so easily connect, which is beautiful, that I can now share my experience with all of you. And so embracing difference, also the understanding that we have this culture, different understandings, we respect each other's cultures, but also maintaining our own cultural heritage. So I think that was beautifully done at Workplace in Mindvalley, where they celebrated the different cultures by allowing them to share the traditions, but then there were common cultures in the company for the work. So this is, I think, a way how we can combine things while just keeping both and not fading away for the culture. And for India, you're such a large country and with so rich history. And for you, I think this becoming distinct is not so so close threat. But for Estonia, for example, with our 1.3 million people, keeping our heritage is so important for every single person, because the country can easily get distinct, and not the country, but the culture itself. So to maintain the language, to nurture it, also, yeah, it's important.
Agne, sorry to interrupt you, because we are running short of time, and can we invite the questions now?
Yes,
Or next
actually,
5 minutes?
yes, perfect. So I'm sorry. I think she heard some noise. Sorry, that's my dog.
Okay.
So I would apologize. 1 second.
Okay, all of you think about the question. Whosoever want to ask, we can take 2-3 questions.